everyone, and welcome to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Glad that you've taken time to be with us, and we have an exciting show in this episode 6 already, as it's flown by. Hall of Fame jockey Gary Stevens will be joining us from NBC and TVG. Brittany Eurton, the reporter and analyst. I've had the pleasure of working with both these people, and I look forward to catching up with them. And Al Ruggles will join us for the vet check from Rood and Riddle this week. All right, so now we're going to talk to Gary Stevens in just a few moments, and he is one of the great jockeys, and it brings this up. When you talk about greats and lists, and the last few years that's become very popular. What is your favorite this, your favorite that? Let's list movies, songs, rock and roll groups, and of course in sports, your favorite athletes, your favorite teams, favorite coaches, favorite managers, or favorite everything. I don't know that it's possible to come up with exactly the best 2 or 3 or 4 of any sport. I think you can get it close to it. But again, the era is the biggest thing. So many things can change, especially in football, basketball, baseball. It's different now than it was, say, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, some of the rule changes, especially in football. A friend of mine, Frank Minifield, who was an all-pro cornerback with the Cleveland Browns back in the 80s, is still upset about some of the changes that cornerbacks can't really touch receivers anymore, in his words. And again, he was a 4-time all-pro with Hanford-Dixon in that backfield, the defensive backfield for the Browns. So, maybe there is something to it. Thomas Kenny, our researcher, is here as always with us. Like your list, like baseball player. What would be your favorite baseball player?
Well, even as a young kid growing up playing Little League, I knew there was something special about Derek Jeter.
Yeah.
So I think I'd have to pick him as my favorite.
I think that's a good choice. And see, to me, Jeter's one of those guys who would hold up through a lot of eras. In some ways, he was kind of old school, wasn't he? I mean,
oh yeah.
And I think that was a compliment. He was like that kind of guy that would have played in the 60s or 70s. He would have played with Aaron or Mays or one of the greats.
Solid fundamentals, good contact hitter, incredible defense.
And what amazed me above all, not just what he did on the field, he's in New York. There's not a bigger spotlight than playing for the Yankees in New York. I don't think there's a bigger spotlight in all of sports than playing for the Yankees in New York. And you never heard anything about him. Nothing. There's no bad things about Derek Jeter. It's all just happiness.
I couldn't tell you what he did off the field because there was nothing to say.
Everybody loves Derek Jeter, and he'll be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Maybe even 100% like Rivera. He might get every vote. I don't know, but he'll be close. So that's a good choice. But, like now, like Bryce Harper, everybody wants to compare him. I don't think you can go back and compare like Stan Musial to Willie Mays to players of today. Ted Williams, maybe you can. It's fun to do. It's fun to put out a list. I have no problems with that. I just think sometimes people get too carried away. And I have friends that don't debate it and get angry. Well, what do you mean you think he's a better player than him? I don't know. It's just my opinion. That's a great thing about lists. I mean, really, can you be wrong? It's your list. Mm-hmm. I cannot be wrong with who I think's the best. You can't be wrong with who you think's the best. Football player, your favorite?
Well, probably Eli Manning. Mostly because I watched that, famous play from the Super Bowl against the Patriots.
The Tyree catch, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and you're in the New York thing, too. You like all those New York teams.
No particular reason, just kind of worked out that way.
Yankees, Giants. Eli Manning, it'd be interesting if he's in the Hall of Fame someday. 2-time Super Bowl champ. Mm-hmm. As many as his brother, who definitely will be in the Hall of Fame. That'd be interesting. Jockeys. All-time jockeys. That's an interesting list. Mostly on shows like this, they debate it. They don't debate it on broad-reaching sports shows about jockeys and horses, but we do on this show. Jockeys all-time, Thomas.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, when I started my research for this episode, the first thing I did was I typed famous jockeys into Google, and the first name that came up, Gary Stevens.
Yeah, he is. He is.
But aside from that, it's, hard to talk about jockeys without talking about, Bill Shoemaker.
Yeah. Yeah, 800-plus races and oldest jockey.
Oldest jockey to win Kentucky Derby, I think.
Yeah. And then there's this other guy that came along that broke his record.
Lafitte.
Yeah, Lafitte Pinkai. Yeah, Lafitte Pinkai Jr., over 9,500 wins. That's just amazing stuff.
I can't even wrap my head around that.
I can't. And to put it in perspective, the great jockeys, like 5,000 is a plateau. You know, live between 5,000 and 6,000. That's huge. Gary Stevens would have to be one of those. Gary was in a magical time when I was first started covering racing, and some of the people I was meeting, there was like a cluster of them at that time. They were all outstanding. I did get to meet, I've interviewed Pinkai and interviewed Shoemaker, both. They were kind of later in the career of Bill Shoemaker, but he was very, very generous with his time. But there was Jerry Bailey, who I worked with on the NBC shows. Trying to think, Chris McCarron, Pat Day. You know, it was kind of like a golden time for jockeys at that time. You know, everybody that came along was a good jockey, it seemed like, and the competition was out there, and it was kind of a fun competition. And, you know, just trying to figure out everybody that I would put in there. I probably just missed somebody that will be mad and won't come on the show now because I shouldn't have mentioned it. But I like Rushmore, don't you? When they say, who would you put on the Rushmore? Who would be on Mount Rushmore?
Right.
I don't know. I mean, can you even name the presidents on Mount Rushmore? That could be our question today that we'll answer later. And don't get confused with the Wes Anderson movie Rushmore, one of his many quirky comedies Bill Murray's in. Kind of interesting movie to see. Luke Wilson's in it, who I think's in like I think one of the Wilson boys is in every one of Wes Anderson's movies. That right, Ben Chaffins? Ben's just walking by. We got Ben Chaffins with us on bass, and again on lead guitar is Scott Hall. What is it? We're like the percussionists, aren't we, Thomas?
Pretty much, yeah.
We just sit here, try to keep a little beat going, try to keep it going.
Just move the show along.
Move the show along, which I don't think I'm doing at this stage. Is that what you're saying? You're saying I should move it along more when we went off track from great jockeys to Wes Anderson movies, maybe we took a step.
I think wherever you're walking is the right direction, Kenny.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you. Unsolicited. We appreciate that. I think I got everybody in there. I don't know. It's kind of fun, though, to look at these lists, don't you think?
We had Mike Smith on. I think, was that one of the first few episodes?
Yeah, it's hard to leave Mike Smith off anybody's list, especially now with a Triple Crown under his belt and to keep going. That's why I say, I mean, how do you compare like Johnny Longden and Bill Hardtack, like you mentioned, and Lafitte Pinkai Jr. and Bill Shoemaker to a Gary Stevens to a Mike Smith? Some of these guys now, Javier Castellano is obviously having a kind of career that John Velasquez still very active out there that you might consider putting them in that list someday. Mm-hmm. You know, they always say, well, Michael Jordan's the best basketball player ever. Or is it LeBron James? See, that's what you would say probably.
That's a very real debate.
And you know, I would say, of course, they are two of the greatest. They would be Rushmore guys, okay? But don't forget a guy named Bill Russell that played for the Boston Celtics, that won all those championships and dominated the game with defense, going up against the likes of Wilt Chamberlain and Nate Thurman and some of these centers at that time and just taking over the game. But people always forget Bill Russell. Well, not many. I mean, they have an award named after him for the most valuable player of the NBA championship series. But I hope that people look up more like that. Okay, so that's enough with lists. Let's get down to the reality of it all. Gary Stevens, who's on all the lists of great jockeys of all time, will join us when we come back here on the Horse Racing Show. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. We're glad that you're with us. And remember, follow us on YouTube and subscribe. Like us on Facebook. You can follow us on iTunes, on Google Play. And we're glad for all the suggestions and the feedback. And I am delighted to have this man with us. He is a great friend of mine. We've known each other for years. I had the pleasure of working with him for several years at NBC. He is one of the all-time great jockeys. Gary Stevens joins us from his backyard in Southern California. Hello, Gary.
Hi, Kenny. How are you doing this morning?
I'm good, my friend. I was asking you earlier just before we came on here because you're about 3 weeks removed from back surgery, the back surgery that finally forced a retirement. How many times have people asked you about your back surgery?
This morning or since it happened? I was out to Santa Anita this morning. And it was a major topic again this morning because everybody's just amazed. Ran into Jill Baffert, Bob's wife, obviously this morning, and she's like, "My God, you had neck surgery?" And so I was showing her the picture of my neck and grossed her out with. I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but
well, let's see.
This is the scar right there. I don't know if it's showing up or not, but
wow.
Anyhow, it's probably the scariest surgery I've ever had because it was so close to the spinal cord. But when I woke up in recovery, the numbness in my hands and arms was gone. The burning on the back of my skull felt like I had 2 coffee pots on either side of my head. And all of that was gone when I woke up. And I remember waking up in recovery and my arms were under the blankets, and I started feeling my fingers one at a time. And I was like, and then I wiggled my feet, and then I opened my eyes, and the surgeon was there, and Dr. Wong, he said, "Is everything all right?" And I said, "Yeah, everything's good." I said, "But, all the numbness is gone." And I said, "Is this going to come back, or is this what it is?" He said, "No, it's not coming back." So it's pretty cool what I'm feeling right now.
Man, that's great to hear, because I tell people, friendship aside, you're one of the great comeback stories. Twice you retired because of your knees. Twice you come back with success. I remember when you told me that you were going to step aside from the broadcasting world and go back to riding in 13. And I thought then, man, I hope this works. And all you did was win the Preakness with Oxbow, Beholder in the Distaff of the Breeders' Cup, and then Mucho Macho Man in the Classic. So you made a good decision, Gary.
Well, I did for the time being. I look back now and I think, man, did I completely lose my mind? I mean, I gave up probably the cushiest job in the world, working for NBC, and I was doing a lot of stuff outside of it, but I wouldn't change anything any of my decisions. And now I've been fortunate enough to fall back in with Fox and doing some broadcasting again and doing what I love with horse racing. But you make decisions as you go along in life, and that's what it's all about. And I look right now, and it's been 3 months, since the injury happened, and it's gone by so quickly. And the older I get, the quicker the time goes by. So I'm just enjoying everything that's coming my way, and horses are what has put everything in line for me from the time that I started.
From that little boy in Idaho.
Yeah, who would have thunk it? And Mom and Dad still in the same house that I was raised in Boise, Idaho, and they're proud of all 3 of their boys. And my mother had a spinal injury 7-8 years ago that was a lot more serious than mine. So that burning that I felt in my arms and the legs and things, that's something that my mom deals with every single day. So I don't know how she does it and keeps a smile on her face, because pain is not a fun thing.
You've had to fight through it. One of the things that I always thought horse racing should maybe not emphasize, but at least not be afraid to touch on it, is the danger of being a jockey. Because let's face it, look at MMA. People like to see people go out there and risk themselves and put themselves in danger. They just do. And I don't know of any sport where the ambulance is always following them right during the event, like in a horse race, right? And
right.
I was up in Chicago at Arlington when you took one of your worst spills. And, it was a frightening thing to be around. And the risk that you take and all jockeys take, I think people need to be aware of it more, because let's face it, all of us can hit a basket. We can shoot a basketball or hit a baseball from childhood. You have some idea. But none of us very few of us will ever ride a horse, 35 miles an hour, just inches from each other in a horse race. It just doesn't. You cannot relate to that. You know what I'm saying?
No, and when I had this appointment with Dr. Wong, it was a 2-week follow-up, and that was the first time I'd seen the hardware that they put in my neck. And just so people know, they did a quadruple fusion and used the bone from my C4 vertebrae was fractured in half, and it was actually up against my spinal cord. So I'm very lucky that I wasn't quadriplegic at the time of the accident. And I'm sure, that things have added up, the falls over the years. But he told me, he said, listen, this is going to take 6 months to a year to fully heal, but you'll have no restrictions when you are healed. I said, wait a minute. So you're telling me if I want to ride, I can ride. He said, oh, absolutely. I started laughing. I said, you know what? I said, it's a good thing I'm 55 years old because I'd do it again right now. And my good friend, Victor Espinoza, I'm sure people in horse racing have followed what's happened to him over the past year with the accident at Del Mar, working out a horse in the morning and had a spinal injury very similar to mine. And he's back riding again. I thought to myself when he announced that he was coming back, I said, is he nuts? And I'm saying that after I had my injury. And I was thinking, there's no way I would come back. Now here I am. And believe me, if I was a young man right now and with the technology they have, there's no doubt in my mind that I would come back. But, I faced a big battle when I came back in 2013 and Father Time just keeps marching on, and it's a young man's sport. And I was able to do it at a high level in my 50s and with all the hardware in my body. So I feel very fortunate, but yeah, you're right. It's dangerous, but it's what we choose to do, what we love. Now we got dogs barking in the background, my 4 dogs, and I think Stanley Steamer is showing up right now. So welcome to the world of Gary Stevens. It's real life out here.
I love the world of Gary Stevens. I've been in it for a long time. It's always fun. Angie and Maddie good? Hi to the girls for me, your wife and daughter. They're all good?
Yeah, thank you, Kenny. Actually, this morning, Maddie was taking her sweet time getting ready for school today, and it's a bit of a hike to her school. It's a Catholic school. And yeah, so sorry about that. Just forgive me for this for a few minutes.
Are you kidding? That's what makes this show.
Oh, the choir started. The choir has started. Hey, Enya, come here. Come join my party. Come here. So anyhow, Maddie was taking her time getting ready for school, and she was getting a special award that she didn't know about, and it was for her being a good Christian and saying hi to people in the hallway. So they recognized her this morning before school started up, and I'm very proud of my little girl.
It shows. I can see it on your face, pal, and that's great. I'm talking with Gary Stevens, Hall of Fame jockey, one of the greats of all time, the youngest jockey to reach $100 million in earnings, the second youngest jockey to be ever inducted into the Racing Hall of Fame, among his many awards and over 5,100 career victories. And it's impossible to say, I guess it's impossible to say, what are the 2 or 3 that stand out after 5,100? I have a few personally that stand out for me just knowing you. And of course, Mucho Macho Man was one of them because just of the comeback and to win the Classic. And, you know, that was a true great Cinderella comeback story. And it happened not far from Hollywood, which you know about as well. That was just one of my favorites. I'm sure there's too many to talk about, really, Gary.
Well, you know, you talk about that, and that was the one thing that was missing from my resume was a Breeders' Cup Classic. I'd run second in a few of them, and just finally accepted that that wasn't going to happen. It wasn't in the cards. The racing god said Gary Stevens won his 3 Derbies and 3 Preakness, 3 Belmonts, but he's not going to win a Breeders' Cup Classic. And, you know, when Mucho Macho Man came along out of the blue in 2013, I didn't expect that. Did not expect that. I didn't expect to ride a filly like Beholder after being out of the game for 7.5 years. So I've been really blessed, and there are so many great memories. And I know you're going to ask me who's my favorite of all time, and that's an impossible question to answer. But I think still deep down in the bottom of my heart, he had his 25th birthday 2 days ago, and that's Silver Charm. Yeah. And I saw a video of him, and he hasn't changed any. He's still he's just a character. They'd put a new blanket on him, and you know, wintertime in Lexington, you're living it right now. And they turned him out in his paddock with this new blanket on. He went and found the biggest mud puddle he could find, laid down, rolled in it like he was a 2-year-old, and he had to dirty that thing up. And that was Silver Charm. He'd get in the mix of a battle. He loved it, and he's just a real character.
That whole run all the way through in '97 was amazing, all the way through up to the Triple Crown. And I as a fan, it was fun to watch. As a broadcaster, it was fun to cover and interview you. And You know, you and Baffert and Silver Charm basically look the same as you did in '97.
Yeah, Baffert's hair was still white though. I mean, he had white hair back in '97. Silver Charm, he was gray. He's white now.
Yeah.
And with what hair I do have left, it's got a lot of gray in it now too. So we might look a little bit the same when I've got this lid on my head, but trust me, when I take this hat off, it's a big difference from the mullet that I had in the 80s and the 90s.
I always enjoy listening to you, you know, and I pay attention. Nobody thinks I listen, but I do, you know, when I'm out there reporting and you were up there and you'd be analyzing the race. I just love to get that, to hear what you said. And it helped a lot, especially in post-race interviews when you'd break it down and then I was getting ready to interview the trainer. I'd remember what you said. And I'm glad you're going to get back into it. You're going to be with Fox this summer. You're going to be in New York, their new series, and like a couple of months up in New York and watch Gary each day on Fox. I mean, it's not like tune in this weekend. That's going to be a stretch.
Yeah, it is a stretch, and I'm excited about it. My oldest son, Tori, we call him TC. Yeah. He and his wife, Jamie, and my grandson, Trip, they live in Saratoga. So I haven't got to spend a lot of time with my grandson, any of my grandkids for that matter. But I'm really looking forward to not only getting up to Saratoga and covering the races up there, the great racing that they have. I'm going to miss Del Mar, but looking forward to Saratoga and looking forward to joining up with my son again.
Oh, that'd be great. And I look forward to listening to you again. And, you know, last week we were talking Oscars and one of the great racing movies of all time, Seabiscuit. I happen to know the guy that played George Wolfe in that movie. He's a good friend. I mean, I was really, I told you, I wrote a story one time. Remember when I was writing for ESPN? It was on ESPN.com Racing, and I think the headline was Gary Stevens. It's no act, and it was a compliment that you were really an actor. It wasn't just a guy showing up, a jockey being a jockey.
Well, you know, after all this time has gone by, Richard Mandela, Hall of Famer, one of the greatest trainers that I've ever ridden for, and the trainer of Beholder, the great Beholder. One day I was out in the paddock and walked up. I believe Mr. Hughes of Spendthrift Farm and the owner of Beholder was out there, and Richard says, you know, all these years I thought that Stevens was one of the greatest riders of all times, and he said after Seabiscuit came out, he said I figured out he was just a good actor, acting like a jockey. So that's the sense of humor but man, again, I was blessed to have been able to work with those actors, Jeff Bridges, Chris Cooper, the whole group, and Toby Maguire, and then to come back and have success again. And it actually caused a lot of problems with my business. The great Warren Studi, one of the greatest trainers of all time out here on the West Coast, who I felt like should have been in the Hall of Fame.
Oh, should be, yes.
Old cowboy, I mean, hard boot. And he told my agent, he said, this Gary, he said, he's got to decide if he wants to be a jockey or a movie star. He said, because every time I get a good horse, he's off doing something else. But I rode some great horses for him. And hey, sometimes when opportunity knocks at the door, you've got to take chances. And sometimes we don't have a lot of time to weigh everything, the pluses, the minuses, but somebody's been looking out for me for sure.
Well, there's a reason for it. You create your own luck, in my opinion. You've worked hard to do that. And speaking of luck, Ronnie Jenkins, do you remember? I don't know if you get so many of them. I know you probably don't. Do you remember I called you just after I saw the first episode of Luck on HBO? I don't know if you remember that. And yes, I told you scared me. That's how good you were, playing a strung out, beaten up, trying to hang in there jockey. And man, it just kind of blew me away. I said, I know Gary, and that's not Gary. That is some real acting going on there.
Yeah, and again, things happen for a reason, and we were all devastated when Luck was canceled, and it happened very, very quickly. And I'm thinking back, and when I said that how good I had it before I put the jock boots back in, back on, doing luck, working for NBC, doing some work for HRTV at the time. And we got canceled. And I thought, what am I going to do? I just re-signed a 5-year contract, and that my life was set. Well, it wasn't meant to be. And that's when I made the decision to come back to race riding. It had a big impact on me. But looking back now, running with the guys that I was running with, and I believe it or not, I was starting to fall into that character a little bit. And I'm not sure I'd be alive right now had luck continued, to be honest with you. Got to be good friends with Nick Nolte. Nick's a great guy, but you don't want to spend nobody can hang with Nick Nolte. I'll just tell you that right now. One of the sweetest guys I've ever met, and how he does it, I have no idea, but he does it good.
I'd like to know his secret. He's amazing. He's got to be like in his 70s now.
Yeah, he is in his mid-70s, and we'd all like to know how he does it. Yeah, he's got a constitution. I guarantee you, if he was a racehorse, he would have raced well into his 20s and been good at it still.
Will we see you back in a movie? We got to get you back in a movie or a TV series or something in between your Fox reporting.
Oh, I hope so, Kenny. It's not something that I was waiting for, this day to come of retirement. And it was funny. Well, it's not funny. It's the truth of it. I'd already gotten a doctor's release after the injury, and I had some good horses to ride later in the week. The injury happened on November 17th. I'll never forget. And I had some good horses coming up at the end of the meet. And I got the doctor's release to return, and they had my x-ray results. And I went to see a chiropractor and gave him the x-ray results, not the pictures, just what they had read. And he said, "I'm not touching you." And he said, "You need to see a surgeon." And I called up my longtime friend, Dr. Taboni, who did my first knee surgeries on me. He's at USC Medical and at Curlin and Job here in Los Angeles. And I read him the report the best I could. And he said, "You need to get up to Los Angeles ASAP and be careful, don't get in a wreck, and get an MRI." Wow. Had the MRI done. And he said, "Have Angie bring that to USC tomorrow morning." Angie dropped it off at 7:30. I was at Santa Anita at Clocker's Corner, and my phone rang at 8 o'clock. And I said, "Sweet Pea, what's up?" And it was Dr. Taboni. He said, "This isn't Sweet Pea. This is Dr. T, and you're done. You will never ride a merry-go-round again, let alone a racehorse." He said, you're in dire need of surgery right now." So that's how it was broke
wow.
to me. And that's what I love about that guy. He just told me the way it was and made it short and sweet. But, the turn of events that have happened over the years have brought some great things to me. But getting back to the acting, hopefully there will be something in the future, because I enjoyed it, and it kind of gives me the adrenaline rush, believe it or not, that racing and even what we do, when we're on live television, when you get it right, you get it right. And when you get it wrong, it's out there for everybody. And you just try and get it right every time and improve on the job you did the day before.
Dogs can bark. It doesn't faze us.
Cars. Well, we got cars going on. There's helicopters flying. I live up in the San Gabriel Mountains in a canyon. And we've actually got 3 reservoirs above us. And I don't know if you remember the movie back in the 80s, Earthquake.
I remember it well, yeah.
Okay. Well, do you remember when the dam broke?
Yes.
And all hell broke loose?
Yes.
That's where I live. Those dams are above me. So the helicopters that are flying up, we got another storm coming in tomorrow. And we've had 21 inches of rain since the start of Santa Anita on December 26th. And we haven't had a winter like this for probably 30 years, and we're about out of drought mode right now, but I live below those reservoirs. So we got helicopters, we got dogs, we got Stanley Steamer, we got the housekeeper in here today, and so I apologize for all the noise, but that is who we are.
And that's why I love you. You know that. A great friend and one of the all-time great jockeys, and you know, if you tell me in a year from now you're going to start riding again, I won't be stunned. I'll be.
Kenny, if I say that, if I even mention it, you just come and put a noose around my neck and because beat Angie to it because that's and Maddie. I can honestly say I'm relieved right now. I'm happy at the way things are going right now. And mostly I'm happy with the health that I have, and I'm looking forward to getting back out on the golf course when the doc says it's time, and just living life, taking trips with my family, and I put my time in, and it's over with. So I'm good with it inside, if you know what I mean.
I do. Gary, listen, I thank you so much. We'll get you back on anytime you want. You can just pop in whenever to say, I want to talk today. Fine. That's good. You know that.
Kenny, I love you, and I appreciate being on your show, and I'd love to be on again for sure, brother.
I love you, pal. Again, to Angie and Maddie, big hugs and best wishes with the Fox shows coming up this summer, and I'll see you before then. So thanks again, Gary.
All right, Kenny. Thank you.
Gary Stevens, one of the greats of all time and one of my favorite people of all time. And we'll be back with more of the Horse Racing Show. Remember to subscribe and like us on YouTube, among other outlets. We'll be back after this. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Thanks again for tuning in. It's time now for our Rood and Riddle vet check, and I'm happy to have with us one of the best in the business. Many times I've interviewed him on live TV, and it's always about a horse injury, how this horse is doing, and every time he comes through with a simple explanation for people like me to understand and the viewers to understand. Al Ruggles joins us.
Well, thanks, Kenny, and thanks for the compliment, and happy to be here.
Isn't it nice to be talking where there's nothing life and death at stake at the moment right now? I'm not asking you if this horse is going to make it or what's the update.
Yeah, there's no trying to get in communications and try to filter it in a quick manner. So this is, it's a lot more relaxed.
I don't know if people realize actually the time frame you work on. From the time I'm getting ready to ask you, you're on a walkie-talkie talking to the vet who's on the track. He's relaying information. This is all going out within like 2 minutes max, maybe of when the horse had to see how the horse is doing. Yeah,
it's really quick, and it's really important to get accurate information. There's a lot of repeating, confirming. Trying to, we really want to be accurate to the television audience. We don't want to give anything that's not correct. We want to be frank but empathetic. It's a challenge, and the truth is, I rarely see the finish of races because I'm looking down the track, and I've been at a lot of finish lines, but I'm mostly watching the back because that's where, unfortunately, some of the injuries happen.
What has been, maybe not in what are some of the biggest changes as far as being able to keep horses alive now with fractures, injuries that possibly 20 years ago it was just impossible to keep them going? Yeah,
there's been a big evolution in repair of orthopedic injury in the horse and management of the entire horse, and I think that's really important. And I would say really even starting probably in the 70s, every veterinary school had sort of a central surgeon. At the time they were all male, so I'll say patriarch of surgery, that sort of delved into what we call internal fixation, where you put in screws and plates. And it really started in the state of the art with people as well. And so the horse industry and the veterinary medicine in general followed that. And then along with that was really improvements in anesthetic management. And that without proper anesthetic management, really, we had problems in recovery. Horses were anesthetized when they shouldn't have been. We're much more relaxed about taking a horse to surgery now. We have ways to stabilize them, splint them. Some severe orthopedic injuries, we typically will wait till the next day when our entire staff is there so we can do our best job. Or we may even wait a few extra days to make sure the soft tissue is in good conditions. And so that's the knee-jerk reaction has stopped. Everyone takes a breath. That's very, very important. We certainly understand how to manage the horse medically, the entire horse, prevent laminitis or overweight bearing on their limb. And then certainly the surgical techniques, using different type of implants, plates and screws to stabilize. Because in horses, the whole thing is making them comfortable. And you make them comfortable by making their legs stable. You and I can have an injury and they'll say non-weight bearing for 6 to 8 weeks. You're on crutches. You may see someone with a severe injury that has what looks like an erector set on their leg. Alex Smith right now had that open tibial fracture. He has what's called an external fixator on. Well, those are very weak types of repairs, and they work great when you can tell your patient not to weight bear.
Right.
But we have a little trouble. We can tell them the listening
horses. They won't listen to you.
They don't listen as well. So we have to be a little more aggressive. And so the orthopedic surgeons, the physicians that see what we do, they think we're really aggressive with our implants, but we have to be for stability.
Battle of Midway is sad stories. A lot of problems going on with Santa Anita right now. They're looking into it. I don't want to offer any conjecture here about anything at this time till we know. They're looking at the surface. They're having some problems with it. They're holding off some training in the morning. We do know that. That's all been reported. But Battle of Midway, really looked like it was going to have a great handicap season coming back. It was looking good. And sadly, on the 23rd, he had to be euthanized, shattered a pastern, I think, in his hind.
Yeah, so he had I haven't seen the radiographs, and again, I don't want to speculate, but very, very serious injury. There's lots of different pastern fractures, and the simple ones, we place two-piece fractures, a few screws. Maybe they're in a cast for recovery, but usually not for very long. And generally, those horses go back to training in 4 months.
Yeah.
But then you can take that fracture and you multiply it into 20 pieces, and then you're dealing with additional soft tissue injury, open fractures, meaning the skin's been perforated. Things of that nature make it much harder. So there's a wide range, and certainly connections with that horse decided that with consult of the veterinarian that there was very little hope for him. And with this cluster of injuries in Santa Anita, the conditions that the racetracks or the ends that the racetracks do to really ensure horse safety and being firsthand involved in this, I think the general public doesn't understand how primary that is.
Yeah.
And, when we get involved with the Breeders' Cup races, I mean, there's so much discussion about horse safety, and there's so much in and out of competition testing of these horses that, they really, the whole group from the grooms to the track superintendent are trying to help prevent injuries, and that's what they're doing now. They're evaluating the track. It may not have anything to do with the track. It could be a cluster of injuries, and you have to look at data over a long period of time. But when you're having a problem right then, they're doing the right thing and addressing it.
I want to throw some out to you and let you give the layman's terms for it, because people hear about this kind of injury. Where is that related to my body? Is that like my ankle, my knee? Did I pull a hamstring, a sesamoid?
Right. So the sesamoid is a small bone in the back of what would be our knuckle, and in horses is a very important structure. It kind of acts as a fulcrum or an attachment for ligaments. And when horses are in full gallop and they hyperextend their fetlock, if those bones lose their integrity, then we have a problem with complete loss of stability of the limb. And so that's what we call a breakdown injury in parlance. So it would be like breaking your knuckle, which might not be that big a deal, but you're not walking on it and you're not propelling yourself at 33 miles an hour.
Right.
So when that happens, they can get significant injury to the vessels that go to their hoof. And when that happens, that's some of the big problems we have, because now we're dealing with a situation where maybe you and I, they may have to amputate our finger. We were in a motorcycle accident, we lost our blood supply to our finger, or we had a farm machinery injury.
Right.
But we can't do that in horses very successfully. So we have to evaluate the soft tissues and the blood supply before we make decisions.
We talked about the pastern. What is that like on a human body, roughly? Where would that be?
Right. So right below the knuckle is P1, which is your first phalanx, and that would be the long pastern bone, and then P2 is the short pastern bone, and then the coffin bone is P3, which would be the tip of our finger. So for us, when you break your P1, sometimes they just leave them. Put you in a buddy splint. They might tape the fingers together, right? Or put a small pin, a very weak pin, just to hold things aligned to fix it. But when we have that problem, we have the whole weight of the horse going through it. So we have to actually repair the bone so that the bone and the screws can hold everything together and withstand the load. So it's a high bar, honestly, and I'm not, it's no conceit intended, but for all orthopedic surgeries in horses, it's a high bar because the weight and our expectations to return to athletic competition, a second of lost speed in a mile is 5 lengths, right? So You know, it's different. You know, if my golden retriever can jump on my bed, I'm happy, right? But if my horse is a second slower, I'm not happy. You know, so it's a big difference.
Having golden retrievers, I relate, and
So-
betting on horses that were slower than I thought they were, I can relate.
Exactly,
You know?
right, exactly.
So it happens out there, and everybody knows the story of Barbaro and
Sure.
how they tried to save him, and it was a valiant effort and emotional, and cards and letters and everything else from all over the world coming in. And you know, it's sometimes, like you say, the whole weight bearing thing. Eventually, it's very difficult to. They're not going to stay off their feet, and it's very difficult to keep going as long as you
Yeah,
can.
there's very big challenges in that particular. My former boss, Dean Richardson, operated on
Yeah.
them, and Dean and I are very close friends.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, there's only a few people that would
Right.
try that, and believe me.
I remember talking to Dr. Richardson
was
after
a,
that. Yeah.
a plus treatment of that horse, and his relationship with the Jacksons was very high to begin with. I mean, you have to have that sort of understanding with a client when you start going down these roads where you have difficult injuries, because you know, it's like I tell people, you're climbing a 100-rung ladder and you get to the 90th rung and sometimes the ladder breaks.
Yeah.
You know, and if you can't emotionally have a problem, and that some people are like, listen, I can't deal with the complication. Well, then maybe you shouldn't go down that path.
That's
you have
right.
to have that understanding.
People have that trouble when they have to euthanize their pet of
Oh, my
13
gosh.
or 14.
No, it's hard.
I think everybody relates to that. That's
Yeah.
why people like horses, maybe not even like horse racing, but they like horses. You know, like horses and dogs. It's hard to knock a horse and a dog, you know?
Well, yeah, something wrong with you.
I mean, yeah, I think you do too.
Exactly.
Cats we're on the fence
Well,
about, although I'll accept it.
I will tell you how many cats I have.
Okay,
It's
I'll
just, I'm not
accept it.
being looked at, but
I'll accept cats. I fed a feral cat one time. Big mistake. Suddenly, like 10 of them show up in my backyard.
Yeah,
So
you became the
got a little
enabler.
cat gang. Yes,
Yeah,
I was the
exactly.
enabler. Doctor, I can't thank you enough. It's always a pleasure. Please
That
come
was great,
back.
Kenny. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. One of the best. Dr. Al Ruggles, that is our Rood and Riddle Vet Check. You're watching or listening to the Horse Racing Show. Follow us and like us on YouTube channel. On Facebook, you can watch us or listen to us actually on iTunes and Google Play. And just like us, because we need love. We need to feel it. We'll be back with more right after this. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Glad that you're with us. If you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe and like. You can also follow us on Facebook and like us there, and at Horse Racing Show on Twitter. And let's see, what else? Google Play and iTunes. Yes, all kinds of things. She is a rising star, or has really established now. She's all over the place at NBC, at TVG, an excellent analyst and reporter, and I'm proud to work with her, and she joins us now from California, Brittany Ayrton. Hello, Brittany.
Kenny, you are far too kind. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad that you're with us, because you're an interesting story. I mean, you've done acting and you've done modeling, and you grew up around horse racing. Your father, Peter, an established trainer himself. And all this kind of came together throughout your career, and then, boom, you know, you become this analyst that everybody wants to follow and keep up with. And what's that ride been like, no pun intended?
Honestly, it's been quite surreal, to be honest, and a little surprising. I never imagined that I would end up in the horse racing industry. Although I grew up in it, it wasn't on the radar for me for a very long time. Acting, film, television has always been a massive passion of mine, but there's something about this industry that once you're in it, you just want to be a part of it. There's something truly remarkable and special about seeing these animals in the morning and how they progress, and I just fell in love with it, and the rest is kind of history, I guess you would say.
Does your dad, Peter, does he still critique you or say, you know, that would have been a good question, Brittany, or have you thought about saying this in your report? Do you even discuss that?
I'll be honest, I don't even know if he watches me most of the time.
What? Everybody watches you.
I think that most of the time when I'm working, he's actually at the track, so he probably doesn't record TVG to see all of those shows. I know that he does record the NBC shows, and he'll sit down with my mom sometimes to watch them, but critique, not so much, to be honest. I spend a lot of time asking him what kind of questions he think would be better. It's always helpful to get someone's perspective that is an expert in the industry and give me a different way of looking at things. And so from the very beginning, I have been that annoying daughter that's constantly asked him questions to try and get better.
You're not annoying. Nobody ever say Brittany Eurton's annoying.
He might say that.
What has been the most fun so far, in this broadcasting career of yours? Are there a couple of moments that stand out for you?
There's so many. I will say that what tops the list for me recently would be something I shared with you, and that would be covering the Kentucky Derby and witnessing a Triple Crown. I was not on site for American Pharoah's Triple Crown, but I know exactly where I was, and I'll never forget that moment watching it on my phone, him cross the wire as the video was buffering, but to actually be there and witness it in person and to be a part of the coverage, that was a really, really special moment for me, and one of those that I needed to pinch myself a bit. But prior to that, I owe everything to TVG for them giving me the opportunity to really learn, as I think you learn more by actually going through the motions and experiences rather than maybe sitting and watching. So they've allowed me the opportunity to really get to where I am today. So I'd say beginning, one of my first interviews at Del Mar was pretty surreal. And then, of course, it's really been capped off by an unbelievable Triple Crown and experience with NBC.
And you've been all over the place already. You've covered races in Europe. You've covered races in Dubai, as well as all over North America. What are the big, aside from the obvious about the turf racing and things in Europe, what's the whole feel of being at a big race, say, in England as opposed to a big race in the States, or being at the Dubai World Cup? Or is there a thread that would link them all that we could understand?
I'd say the pageantry and the partying probably is a big thread between the Breeders' Cup, the Dubai World Cup, and Royal Ascot. There's something, though, that we could take away here in the States from what each country and jurisdiction does. When I had the opportunity to go to England for Royal Ascot, and it was my very first time going to work this past year, whereas in years prior, I've gone as a fan. And so to notice the difference of that, it was wonderful to see how much the country comes together for these 5 days worth of racing. And I can only imagine what it's like in Australia, because Australia's racing is on the same level as our baseball or basketball. So it just seems to be a bigger deal in other countries than maybe it is here. And I hope that one day we can get the love for racing in the States to be the same.
That's a great point. And I'll ask, as someone that you cover the business, we talked about your father, Peter, being in the business. And people ask me, what do you think racing needs? I said, I think racing needs to have more fun overall. Mm-hmm. It doesn't hurt to show that you're at a sporting event and you're having fun. There's some serious moments, but it can't always be church-like. And I think sometimes it gets that feeling, in my opinion. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I completely agree with you. And that's something that I really enjoy about the Breeders' Cup, because I do think that we showcase all of the fun people are having. And the same thing with the Triple Crown, but there are so many moments in between that I don't think the novice racing fans really know about. And I say with my friends know nothing about racing other than I cover it all the time and my dad's a trainer. But when I bring them out to the track, they wager, they go down to the paddock, they get all dressed up. And once they go for the first time, they want to keep coming. Yeah. So I think it's about making the races fun again and pretty much allowing people to know that it's there. If they know it's there, they go for the first time. It's like that bug that bites you and you have to keep coming back.
That's a great point. And let me, how many times have you interviewed Peter after a race or before a race?
My dad, Peter?
Yeah.
I try to avoid interviewing him, to be honest. I don't want people to think that I'm playing favorites. So if it's an obvious choice in a race where he has a live horse that, deserves me to ask him a few questions, then I will. But I think my favorite is interviewing him after a big win.
Yeah.
I can't help but get choked up.
I can imagine. Well, actually, I was with you when your dad won a big race. We weren't on site, but we were watching it. You remember in the NBC trailer? Was that right?
Yes. Well, I think we've had some times where I've been watching the races and his horses haven't quite got there. It was Belmont Stakes Day, and he had Darth Vader running in the Easy Goer Stakes, and the horse, he was on the inside and he was fighting. He finished third that day, but it honestly, it felt like a win. Thanks for watching with me.
I remember that. I mean, I was excited about it, because, again, that's part of it. I think that's part of any sport. When you know somebody involved, even if you don't know them, obviously, to work with you. And I've met your dad a couple of times. He doesn't know who I am, but I've met him a couple of times.
Oh, he knows who you are.
Well, I'd never assume, that. But working with you, and I remember Old Check and Lafitte were all in there, and everybody's cheering, and because there is a rooting interest, because we're rooting for you and rooting for your dad. So that was always a lot of fun.
And it's kind of an out of body experience for me. Every time I'm rooting on my dad's horses, I forget that there's anybody around me, and I'm squawking like a bird. I mean, it's a little embarrassing. I hope nobody ever catches that on camera.
Well, wait till this year when we have the camera, when I take the phone out when you're at the
yes,
put it up
all
there.
over YouTube.
Yeah, we'll YouTube that to death. Your McDonald's commercial, right? Was it McDonald's?
Yes. Wow. Throwback.
Well, that was big. You know why? Because you're the only person I personally know who was in a McDonald's commercial. I've watched millions of it, and I've eaten millions of their burgers. Shouldn't say that because they're not sponsoring the show yet. We'll keep it open for Burger King and Wendy's, by the way, out there if they want to sponsor.
How about In-N-Out? Throw that
and In-N-Out. Oh, yeah, if we can only get In-N-Out out of California. I think they go to Texas, right? In-N-Out goes to Texas. I know they're in Arizona and in Nevada. I think that's right.
Wow, I didn't even know they made the move to Texas. I thought it was only Nevada and California. Well, maybe it'll make it your way to Kentucky. Much better than Shake Shack.
I don't think they'll ever get here. But when I'm in L.A., hey, that's another. Whenever you're in L.A., the cast and crew of the horse racing go to In-N-Out Burger. Wonder if we got any residuals on that, like you did for the McDonald's commercial, because that was a big. We should. You're wearing your McDonald's uniform and the whole thing, right?
So I was just supposed to be a customer, and we were eating. It was one of their new wraps with the fried chicken and lettuce and mayonnaise and the whole thing. And I just had to eat and eat and eat and make it look delicious every time I had a bite.
And you did. That's acting.
And that is acting. That is acting. Who knew that all my years spent training the Meisner technique and whatnot would result in a McDonald's commercial eating a fried chicken wrap.
What did all that acting though? Did that help in the transition over to being on TV? I mean, it's all kind of a performance. We have to know things, and people aren't writing lines for us when we're covering an event. Right. We're doing that ourselves, but still, it's a bit of a performance, I think.
Absolutely. I think just being comfortable in front of the camera is the first thing. And I always felt, as much as I loved acting, it was always difficult for me to delve into a character that was similar to myself. And I'm not quite sure why, because I was given these words and the character was very similar to and I couldn't fall into it because they weren't my words. But for whatever reason, transitioning to broadcasting and actually being myself, but not given those words, has felt much easier to me. I won't say that this job is ever easy, because it shouldn't be. You should be constantly learning and challenging yourself. But I think that just being comfortable in front of the camera was the biggest help. And of course, and you know this, when you have a very small amount of time and you need to have your information get across to an audience in that short amount of time, you have to make sure that you have it. Well, for me, I memorize it. I write everything out and I memorize it. And I think that my acting classes 1000% have helped me do that, because I can put together a 30-second piece, write it out and memorize it. And that's not as much of a struggle because of those acting classes. That makes sense.
Brittany Eurton, NBC and TVG analyst and reporter. We work together, getting ready for the Triple Crown coming up. And so with that, Brittany, who are some of the horses that you're keeping an eye on now, knowing that all things can change in the next 8 weeks or so before the Derby?
Oh, can't it ever? I mean, I think it would only have been about a week ago that Justify debuted, and then he became the Triple Crown winner. So talk about things changing in a matter of a small amount of time. I think it's pretty wide open this year. I don't think we've seen a horse on the track that would resemble an American Pharoah or a Justify. you know how it goes in this industry on the West Coast. Bob Baffer always has a loaded bench, and I think that that's no different this year. I cannot wait. I will say this for the San Felipe. That is gearing up to be an absolute battle of some of the best horses on the West Coast, with game winner Improbable, who is mini Justify in many opinions, just purely because of how he looks, and then Instagram for Jerry Hollendorfer. And those three alone, clash of the Titans.
And that's one of the, I think it looks on paper to be one of the best San Felipes in a long time. I always hate to say the best ever, but it's going to stack up with most of them.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And it's interesting because Javier Castellano flew out to work Instagram on Monday, and that's actually the second time that he's done that to try and find his Derby mount. So he flew out to work Bolt d'Oro before Bolt d'Oro Mackenzie clashed in the San Felipe. So that was a great race last year with long inquiry and then the disqualification. And so hopefully we get sunny skies, because the weather hasn't been all that wonderful out here on the West Coast. Not complaining. It's much colder in Kentucky, I'm sure.
Well, it never rains in Southern California, but it pours. And I mean, and I guess it's needed. And I know sometimes too much. So that's why I never became a meteorologist. It's too much pressure.
But then again, I feel like they don't have that much weight on their shoulders because they can always be wrong. It's the weather, right?
You know what? Let's just cut to the chase. What we do is much tougher than what they do, right? We could go.
Sure.
We can say we can miss 3 horses. We could pick like 7 out of 10 races. But if the 3 you don't pick are the Triple Crown on TV, if you miss, you just don't pick any of the horses that win.
There you go.
You don't know anything. But we could say, as they did in Louisville this past Derby, well, there's a 20% chance of rain, and there was a 20% chance that it would never stop. Is what it turned out to be, as we know, being right there drenched. See, they didn't take.
How about that weather that we trekked through on Kentucky Derby, and these horses and jockeys rode in?
Yeah, it's amazing. But again, the weather people missed it. It was supposed to be a decent day, some rain, and it's going to clear up, but it didn't. They still have their jobs.
This is true. This is true.
I just lost the weather audience. All the weather people are flipping back to Weather Channel. I understand. I'm watching Stephanie Abrams and Jim Cantori. I understand.
I'm actually watching the news right now. They're saying that we've got a storm rolling in. I actually believe them now every time they say it.
Well, if you say it enough, sometimes you're going to hit. I mean, it's like some of these handicapping shows, and I'm not knocking anybody, okay, because it's tough. And we know the favorite wins a third of the time, and it's tough. And you do a great job handicapping. But, there are a few. We won't mention them names, but some of them. They'll pick like 6 horses in the field of 10. They'll tell me that, and I go, well, I pick 6 out of, give me 6 horses to pick and I might win this race out of 10.
Well, how about when you and I were in Chicago for the Arlington Million, and I could not for the life of me land on who I wanted to pick to win that race. And I think by the end of it all, I had picked 7 different horses.
Yeah. But, sometimes a race shapes up like that. And to be honest, if I could look back at that Arlington Million right now from this past year, I would probably pick 5 or 6 horses, again, to do it over. I guess the only thing I was on grass to say Chad Brown. Of course, again, that's going to encompass, like 3-4 horses in every big race, it seems, on the grass.
Exactly. So you're not just, that's at least 7 horses between those 2 races, the Beverly D and the Arlington Million. But Eddie Olczyk, he gave me such a hard time for that.
Well, everybody wants to know your picks always. I imagine when you're walking around the track and the people see you on NBC and TVG, and especially, with what you do, they come up and say, who's going to win? They may even say that before they say, hi, Brittany. Hey, who's going to win?
It is kind of one of those in passing, hey, who do you like here? And I'll be honest, I would never say, because my role at TVG and NBC as well, even though I do give selections here and there, is primarily as a host and reporter. So I in no way think that I'm on the level of some of the experts that we have at TVG, or on the level of Eddie Olczyk, who can hit the pick 6 and have a massive score or win the betting challenge. So I do not put myself in that realm at all. I'm learning every day, and handicapping is such a fine art, in my opinion. But yes, when you're out at the track, people just want that winner. They want that score. I'll be on the set and we'll have guys coming up, and Todd Schrupp will be on the desk with trainer Ron Ellis, and you've got them having a back and forth about why they like their horses. I've always been a math lover, and I feel like handicapping is such a math-based science. that I always find it interesting finding out how people land on certain horses or whatnot. But yep, when you're at the track, people always want who's the next winner? Give me a winner.
Right. And pull the videotape. As we stood side by side, we each picked Justified to win the Triple Crown at the Belmont.
That we did. We weren't unanimous that day, were we?
You know what? We were not unanimous. And that's why I take pride in saying it, because some people would say, well, everybody was picking Justified at that time. No, they were not. But we did.
There you go.
I think we were maybe 80% of the crew, but it wasn't 100%.
Feather in our cap.
That's it. Brittany, it's been a pleasure catching up. Thank you for being on the show.
Kenny, thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully soon.
Yes, we'll be there, Triple Crown, all the way through with the NBC crew. And Brittany, it's great to see you. I hope to catch up with you maybe even before I see you in Louisville.
Perfect. I look forward to it. Kenny, have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Brittany Eurton of NBC and TVG, analyst and reporter. Great insight as always. You are watching or listening to The Horse Racing Show. Remember to subscribe and like us on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter at Horse Racing Show, like us on Facebook, and you can listen to us on your iPad out there, iTunes, and you can also listen to us on Google Play. We'll be back with more right after this. Thank you for joining us again this week on the Horse Racing Show. We remind you, please go to YouTube, watch the show, subscribe, and like us. It's really important, because if you don't, they're going to come and repossess all this fine furniture that we have around us right now. And it'll be a sad day. Ben, Thomas, Scott, we're all on the verge,
We're invested.
We're invested. That's right. We thank you for investing in us. Follow us at Horse Racing Show on Twitter. And let's see.
Like us on Facebook.
Like us on Facebook. What else?
We've got podcasts, audio version on Google Play and iTunes.
See, you got it. I don't have to do this anymore. You just jump in with this, okay?
I'll be your social media guy.
I need a social media guy, that's for sure.
Starting up an Instagram as well with some behind-the-scenes
We are?
action.
Wow.
Yep.
I wish people would tell me this. I got to start watching this show. All right. Well, thank you for watching or listening to us this week. Thanks to Gary Stevens. Silver Charm. We talked about a list. Silver Charm. Wow. There he was on his list of his favorite horses. This is a guy that won, how many races did I say Gary won? Like over 5,000, 5,100 or something. And he's got that. That's pretty impressive. Brittany Eurton. Always a pleasure catching up with her, and Dr. Al Ruggles. Thank you for being with us in episode 6. I'm Kenny Rice, and we'll see you again next week here on the Horse Racing Show.